Greetings, friends around the world. This is Dr. Bob Thiel for the Bible News Prophecy channel. Barack Obama and the State of the Apocalypse. Back in 2008, I started to warn that I felt that U.S. President-elect at the time, Barack Obama, may be apocalyptic. In 2009, I wrote a book where I listed 7 reasons why I thought he was apocalyptic. And in 2012, I expanded that list in another book to 17 reasons that I thought he was apocalyptic. Every year he gives what's called the State of the Union Address, and in 2014 he gave his State of the Union Address as well. I'd like to go through some of the reasons why I feel that Barack Obama is apocalyptic, and basically the state of the apocalypse now. Now, before going into that, let me state absolutely clearly, I do not believe that Barack Obama is the prophesied Antichrist. I've never believed he was the Antichrist. A book I wrote in 2009, I listed 8 reasons that people said he was the Antichrist and explained why they were all wrong. I believe that over time I'll be proven additionally more right on those particular points. But what about being apocalyptic? Well, in 2009, I'd like to read a few things that I mentioned. One is I put down that it was the timing of his election. God has a plan. God has a plan for humankind to rule itself for 6,000 years, after which there'll be a 1,000-year millennial reign of Jesus Christ. Well, if you add up who begot who, when, and the reigns of the kings and all that type of thing, you find out that that 6,000-year period before the millennium ends sometime in the 21st century, and could be happening shortly after Barack Obama leaves office. So that was one reason that I thought he was apocalyptic, and I still believe that. Secondly, there was a prophecy in Deuteronomy 28:43 about aliens rising up. And while I'm not challenging Barack Obama's citizenship, the fact that his father was of low Kenyan descent was something unique in American history. So for that was a reason. Another one was because of debt. The United States is in more debt than any country in the history of humanity. I felt, based on what Barack Obama had said during his campaign and after becoming president, that he was going to greatly increase the debt of the United States. And he has. In the book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, there's a prophecy. In verse 3, it tells you that it's for the appointed time of the end. And it talks about creditors rising up against the one who's heavily indebted. The United States becomes more and more heavily indebted. This portion of apocalyptic prophecy is going to come to pass. Fourth reason I gave is that I believe that Barack Obama was going to cooperate too much with the Europeans. While cooperation is normally a good thing, I believe that Barack Obama was going to cross the line on that, and believe that he's done so. And that'll be one of the points I'm going to mention when I read a couple of statements that he made in his 2014 State of the Union Address. He also called for increased dialogue amongst various Muslim nations, and I felt that what he was doing there was also apocalyptic, would set things up for the time of the end, and I think he's done so. He also indicated he was going to shift financial priorities away from military spending more toward domestic spending. And while we can see valid arguments for doing that, the reality is this will make the United States weaker, and it has made the United States weaker relatively to other countries. But probably the most disturbing that I wrote in 2009 was a quote from him, and I'd like to just read this quote. It says, "The only measure of my success as president, when people look back 5 years from now or 9 years from now, is going to be, did I get the economy fixed? I'm going to be judged on, have we pulled ourselves out of recession? Yet God expects leaders to encourage repentance and moral behaviors that are subject to destructive punishment. But Barack Obama didn't do that." And so that was something that I was concerned about. And actually in 2009, in that particular book, there were a variety of predictions in the book, 32 of which were confirmed by the December 22nd, 2012, and 7 to 9 of them had to do with actions taken by the Barack Obama administration. Now, how else is Barack Obama apocalyptic? Well, in 2012, I wrote another book, and I added to the list from the prior time. Now, in my 2009 book, I warned that the United States was having problems with its GPS system, the global positioning system. Now, when I wrote this back in May of 2009, a spokesman for the United States Air Force said the U.S. did not have a problem with its GPS system and nobody needed to be that concerned about it. It wasn't going to affect the United States' military and that type of thing. But in 2009, I disagreed and said that I felt that this may lead to the United States deciding it wanted to use Europe's Galileo system, which was not functional at the time, for part of the United States' satellite imaging and satellite defense. And that was actually sadly confirmed. By late July 2010, the United States announced, yes, that to augment its GPS system, it's going to rely on Europe's Galileo system for part of its defense. In 2012, I also said another reason I felt Barack Obama was apocalyptic was because of collider technology. Specifically, the Europeans have something called the Large Hadron Collider. And actually, I warned about that in 2009, that this is going to give the Europeans unique technological abilities or spin-off technology that the Europeans could use militarily against the United States. And since that time, the U.S. has basically mothballed all but one of its super colliders. The Europeans not only have the Large Hadron Collider, which they shut down right now just to analyze all the data that they've collected, and they're trying to make it better. In addition to that, over in Germany, they've got one called FAIR, another collider they're working on as well. So we're seeing the Europeans gain technological advantages over the United States, which is something that I've warned about. The Bible tells us in Revelation 13, verse 4, who is like the beast, who is able to make war with him. And it says the world marveled at the beast because of its military power. Well, I have long felt and written that this would happen because of technological advances that the Europeans would develop. And that's what's been going on. Now, one thing that was mentioned in the State of the Union address in 2014 by Barack Obama is, quote, "Our alliance with Europe remains the strongest the world has ever known." I would disagree with that. In 2013, we had the Snowden leaks. Edward Snowden explained the United States has been spying on various ones and basically said that the directives the United States spying agencies had were basically to spy on everyone except we didn't have to worry about close friends. Now, who were listed as close friends? United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, the Anglo-Saxon descended nations. The rest of the world were not considered to be close friends, and the United States spied heavily on them, especially Germany. And also apparently put bugs in EU buildings and all that type of thing. And the Europeans were incensed by that. So in the last year or so, I would say that our alliance, the United States' alliance with continental Europe, has not been strengthened. The Europeans have been outraged. So instead of abandoning the alliance, the United States has basically said, look, Europe, we're going to explain to you how we spy. We're going to spy on you less. We're going to teach you all of our spying techniques because we're going to rely on you. Now, I believe that's extremely dangerous and biblically very naive. Now, you might say Europe couldn't possibly destroy the United States because the United States has the strongest military in the world. It can't be destroyed. Well, if you have your Bibles, I'd like you to go to the book of Daniel, chapter 11. In the book of Daniel, chapter 11, we hear about a leader who's called the final king of the north. In Daniel, chapter 11, verse 39, I'd like to read just this one verse. Thus, he, that's the king of the north, shall act against the strongest fortresses or the foreign god which he shall acknowledge and advance its glory. He will cause them to rule over many and divide the land for gain. Now notice that this king of the north goes against the land with the strongest fortresses. Well, who's got the strongest fortress? Who's got the strongest military in the world currently? Well, it's the United States. So if this is a prophecy for the 21st century, and because of God's 6,000, 7,000 year plan, 6,000 for human beings to rule, plus 1,000 years for Jesus Christ to reign, we're pretty close to the end of that 6,000 years. that will occur in the 21st century, and the nation with the strongest fortresses in the 21st century is the United States. This is an end-time prophecy for the United States that U.S. political leaders, and not just Barack Obama, but other ones as well, have overlooked. And I think that's extremely dangerous, and I believe that's also very apocalyptic. Now, some other reasons is that I've listed is that the debt that's been incurred in the United States is extremely dangerous. Yet, in the State of the Union address, Barack Obama said, quote, "Our deficits cut by more than half." Well, the United States hasn't cut its deficits in half. I presume what Barack Obama is referring to, or referred to in his 2014 State of the Union address, is that the amount of projected federal debt for a particular year is half as much as it was a few years ago when he and/or the last President Bush had extremely high deficits because of their various stimuluses. But that's not cutting the deficit in half. The debt keeps going up. So you could say that an annual deficit's a bit lower, but it's still higher, and we keep increasing debt. I believe that's setting up for food inflation, which is something that the Bible warns about in the book of Revelation, chapter 6, verses 5 and 6. Now, Barack Obama broke a campaign promise about requiring that genetically modified organisms be labeled. And while Republicans, for example, such as Mitt Romney, who ran against him the last time, also sadly support genetically modified organisms. So again, this is not partisan. I think both parties are guilty of a lot of things. I believe that's setting the United States up for famines that Jesus warned about in Matthew 24, verse 7, as well as food shortages, which one of the horsemen of the apocalypse in Revelation 6, 5, and 6 also warned about. Barack Obama has also made a variety of class warfare comments, and I believe that eventually we're going to see civil unrest in the United States. I think the stage is being set for that, and I think that's another reason why I believe he's been apocalyptic. The Bible says in Genesis chapter 24:60, that having the gates of one's enemies is a blessing. But the Bible also talks about losing those type of blessings, and Barack Obama seems to be the first president in U.S. history to significantly giving back the seagate, if you will, of the Falkland Islands to Argentina, even though the people who live in the Falklands don't want that to happen. So I believe that's apocalyptic as well. Now, one of the concerns that I also said in one of my books, the 14th one, is that the United States and Barack Obama is focused too much on threats from China, and because of this, they won't be ready for a threat from Europe. Actually, when Julia Gillard became the Prime Minister of Australia, within hours of me learning that happened, I warned that I thought she was going to do something to get China more interested in taking over Australia. And she and U.S. President Barack Obama agreed to station U.S. Marines in the city of Darwin, Australia. And then later, a Communist Party newspaper came out and said in China that Australia is going to be in the crossfire or the crosshairs of some war if the United States and China go at it. So I believe that those actions that both she and he took, Julia Gillard and Barack Obama took, are putting Australia at risk for being taken over by China, which I think may occur in conjunction with the prophecy that we read in Daniel chapter 11, verse 39. Remember, the king of the north goes against the strongest fortresses and divides land for gain. The United States owes China a lot of money, depending on how you count, between $1 and $4 trillion. And if the Europeans take over the United States, which biblically they're going to do, it may be that the Chinese are going to say, hey, wait, what do we get from this? And it may very well be that when they divide the land, perhaps China will get maybe some U.S. territory, but perhaps the Europeans will say, go ahead, you can have Australia payment as part of your debt. So we see things setting that up. The other reason I felt Barack Obama was apocalyptic is because he's encouraged and not discouraged certain aspects of immorality. In the State of the Union address, he said in 2014, across the country, we're partnering with mayors, governors, and state legislators on issues from homelessness to marriage equality. Marriage equality? That's kind of a code word for getting homosexual marriage approved in more and more parts of the world, parts of the country. And that's what he's been doing. His administration decided, in violation of his oath to defend the laws and Constitution of the United States, to not defend the Defense of Marriage Act. His administration filed a brief against it, and his administration has been in favor of various aspects to the homosexual agenda, which I think is dangerous to the United States. I think it may be a contributor to some of the extreme weather we're starting to see, and I think that's bad. Furthermore, Barack Obama has pushed abortion, increased the availability both in the United States and outside the United States from some of his policies, and I believe that's also wrong and also very apocalyptic. On May 23rd, 2012, Barack Obama claimed to see an end to wars of the past decade, and he said, quote, now we can see the light of a new day on the horizon. Now, to me, this sounds a lot like New Age doublespeak for a new age of peace. The Bible warns that people were going to say peace and safety and sudden destruction are going to come. So those are the types of things we're starting to see happen. Now, one of the things he mentioned as president, in his State of the Union address, as president, I'm committed to making Washington work better and rebuilding the trust of the people who sent us here. Well, the trust of the United States has gone down with the disclosures from the Snowden matter, explaining all the spying, espionage that's been done. President Obama went out and said that his administration is going to do something, but basically he indicated they still want to collect and spy on everything they possibly can, but maybe they'll get the court involved a little more often, and maybe they'll move records to one building or another. But the United States has been building massive buildings in order to store data, and basically espionage data. And the United States, again, has said it's going to share this information with the Europeans. And the Bible warns about one who's going to be able to control buying and selling in Revelation chapter 13. And you need some kind of a massive database to do this. And the United States, in my view, is setting up for this portion of the apocalypse to be fulfilled. Now, one thing he mentioned in his speech is, first time in over a decade, business leaders around the world have declared China is no longer the world's #1 place to invest. America is. Okay, investors come and go based on what they see. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're not. But one of the things that's propped up the United States stock market and investing climate has been this program called quantitative easing that the U.S. Federal Reserve has implemented, where they've created trillions of dollars of money just out of the air. It's basically electronic dross. Civilizations such as Rome, by the way, were plagued by dross coins. That means their currency became worth less and less. So instead of having silver coins, they used to put copper in them or some cheapened metal. The United States actually started to do that in 1965. So again, it's not unique to Barack Obama. But to do it in a wider, broader scale, the United States has been doing it through its federal deficits and through quantitative easing. And again, quantitative easing is a program by which the U.S. Federal Reserve basically prints up money. They print up a note called an IOU to the government or a treasury bill, and they just print money. And at some point in time, this is going to come back and haunt the United States, and China is not doing that. Now, interestingly, China claims it's surpassed the United States to become the world's leading trading nation. And while the European Union actually, as a bloc, is bigger, this shows a decline of the United States. And I believe the decline of the United States must happen before the apocalypse can occur. A few other things that have been going on, which I consider apocalyptic, are the increased amount of celebrity pornography. We're seeing celebrities wearing less and less. One very famous singer actually did a concert a few months back, totally in the nude. We're seeing more what I call soft pornography on television. And U.S. President Barack Obama in 2012 actually praised a singer as a perfect role model for his daughter, who is known for showing a lot of skin. So instead of standing for biblical morality, he's encouraging celebrity pornography, which I think is wrong. Furthermore, he made a few comments in January 2014 about abortion, supporting abortion rights. But in addition to that, he also went out and said that, well, he doesn't really recommend marijuana. He doesn't think it's any worse than alcohol. And he seems to be setting up the stage for more and more people to accept marijuana. And I'm not going to go into any health benefits of marijuana, but simply say that the Bible warns against becoming intoxicated. And while one can drink one drink of alcohol, if you will, and not become intoxicated, as far as I know, you can't smoke or toke, as they say, a marijuana cigarette and not become intoxicated. And so setting people up to accept more drugs, I think, is wrong. So I've given you the state of the apocalypse related to Barack Obama. There's at least 17, 18 reasons that I believe President Obama has been apocalyptic. Again, I do not believe that President Obama can be, or will become the final Antichrist. I don't think that's possible. But in terms of the state of the apocalypse, we're getting closer and closer. The end of God's 6,000 years for humans to rule before Jesus has to come and intervene is getting closer and closer. We continue to see the decline in morality in the United States. We continue to see shifts in terms of the military. We're seeing increased debt. Can you see the handwriting on the wall? Do you understand why Barack Obama has been apocalyptic, and that we are getting closer and closer to the fulfillment of the prophecies in the book of Revelation, also known as the Apocalypse? This is Dr. Bob Thiel for the Bible News Prophecy channel.